teachers' ability and admit their faults, knowing and embracing the negative consequences. And each time they have been comforted and forgiven by their classmates. This is responsibility met with empathy. But most of all, we are forced to persevere, whether we like it or not. Every T student is bound to have some crazy story of being placed way outside of their comfort zones. Whether it's raccoons breaking into their tent, falling off a waterfall, getting caught in a flash flood, rappelling a 240-foot cliff, or my most recent, being trapped in the ocean, 100 feet underwater, surrounded by sharks. The point, however, of these perilous escapades was never to push us out of our comfort zones so that we could return to comfortable safety and never look back. The idea is that we expand our comfort zones, building the courage and know-how to not only overcome, but thrive in and even seek out adventures that continue to test and build our character far beyond our academic careers.
Thanks, Jules. Barrett.
So, academics at T. It's quite a unique topic. Frequently, people talk about the expedition part or how it drives character within, but I want to talk about the classroom. The classroom aspect at T has always been one of my favorite parts of coming to the school. One of my most fond memories was of engineering, an intensive I took in freshman and sophomore year. In freshman year, we were learning about the physics of Formula One racing. Through that, we used go-karts, as Jules spoke about. We tested different aspects, changing certain ratios or adding a parachute and really diving into the intricacies of the physics. And the thing that I love about that the most, aside from it being a lot of fun to drive go-karts, was that we actually learned practical knowledge. It didn't just teach us, it prepared us for the future. Some of the things I learned in that class was about how to 3D model using certain softwares, how to build electronics, and how to understand the circuit. And those weren't just things that they were teaching us because it was part of the curriculum. It was things that actually prepared me, things that actually inspired me, things that inspired me to go pursue college classes at Sierra, a local community college, things that helped me, work in our clubs. In Rocket Club, for example, I use 3D modeling frequently. And that's the thing I love about T, is that every class has these things. They have these things that inspire you. From, my English classes and world history classes that inspired me to take the AP exams, to the intensives like wildflowers that inspired my botany. Like, there are just endless opportunities of inspiration from each and every one of the classes here. And that is one of the things I love most.
Thank you, Barrett, Jules, and Ron. Appreciate it. Hard to top that. Maybe we just stop right there. Wouldn't that be easier? As they were talking, I was looking across the room at that poster over there. And stewardship, advocacy, gratitude, empathy, collaboration, craftsmanship, responsibility, perseverance. We just heard about 3/4 of that list or more in 5 minutes from 3 students. It's amazing. It's just amazing. Thank you, the 3 of you, for stepping up, Chair. So this is my second day of my 8th week. So this is a little wild to be up here. And I'm nervous. And I'm nervous not because I'm scared of public speaking, but I'm nervous because I feel a duty to step up and support this community. I'm going to talk about some hard stuff. We'll get there in a minute. But a little bit of an introduction, sort of a whirlwind about who am I and everything else. I grew up on the East Coast outside of Boston. I went west for college. Then I did a little detour to Scandinavia for a couple of years. I was a Nordic skier and a biathlete. And then my wife, Molly, and I, right over there, started a school in Leadville, Colorado that combined academics, wilderness, and small intentional community in a semester format. Took us 3 years to start it. We ran it for 15 years. And then we decided that we'd be taking other people's kids on grand adventures. So we'd take our own kids on a grand adventure. So we sold our house, our cars, and most of our stuff, got on a boat in France and went sailing for 3 years and homeschooled the kids for 3 years. Did a big old figure 8 around South America. as far as Cape Horn and as far north as the Arctic Circle. The next step for our family was Midland School in Los Olivos in Santa Barbara County, where I was head of school for 8 years. And I think you all know what it was for schools to shepherd themselves through COVID. It was a sort of a wild time, but it was a 9-12 co-ed boarding school with a deep commitment to work, and we grew about half our own food value on a 3,000-acre ranch on the edge of Santa Barbara County. And then I took a little reprieve, and after a couple 100 days of sailing and 100 days, 95 days, to be honest, of skiing, I feel much better. And now here I am. So that's in 30 seconds, my journey to tea. But why I'm here because of the mission. There's so much of the values and the mission of this place that align with both my personal and professional passions. Right. And in that way, it's a fantastic fit, and I'm really excited to be here. Tea is a place where, 4-year-olds are hiking 4 miles to get their way out of preschool. What do we call that? Pre-K. And we just heard about high school students exploring foreign lands and the depths of the Grand Canyon. And I was talking with DC about a 5th grade project over the last couple of weeks, where suddenly the 5th graders find themselves talking with somebody about food stress and agriculture, whose family roots go back to Arkansas, to an actual sharecropper's family, right? And in this incredible intersection of science and agriculture and policy and food, right? That just illuminates the moment, that they just can't help themselves but be drawn into the real, right? And I think a lot of what tea does, in my language, right, is you find opportunities for students to have experiences in the crucible of the real. That's where real leaders are born. That's where real experiences come from, right? The only way to learn how to dress properly is to go stand out in the rain and get cold and decide that a rain jacket and a hat are a bright idea. Then you will forever remember that lesson. We can't sit up here and tell people that, right? And those are the simplistic parts. A lot have asked, and I thought I might address it right off the bat, why interim? I'm the interim head of school for this school year and next school year. Essentially, T found itself in a tenuous moment, which I will explain in just a minute. And the board of trustees asked me and sought out some near-term leadership to help us find the way in the near term. My role is very much to stabilize the finances, clarify what we're up to programmatically, and strengthen enrollment. It's pretty simple, with a few other add-ons here and there, but that's what I'm up to. I know that I have to earn your trust. I know that that is earned through action, not through words. Today is mostly about words. So in 6 months, reflect on this or watch the video again and decide, right? But that's where we are and where we find ourselves right now. And it might be hard. And we also do not have the luxury of waiting around and taking time. I can't take 2 years to sort of get to know everybody and figure it all out, right? We need to evolve and act and pivot now. So there will be planning. I've had an unbelievable number of meetings with parents and the leadership team and the board of trustees and faculty and staff trying to come to know and understand this place. Fortunately, the business you're in, right, the nature of the program and activities are not alien to me. It's something I understand. The idea of a school stopping school and say, let's go out for 10 days, right? Let's just stop school, right? Been there, done that in lots of other institutions. Obviously not the same as T, but lots of shared values and shared understandings and practices. I think I can help. I'm not sure, but I think I can help, right? But I absolutely need the mandate that comes with being an interim, right? That's what's called for in this moment. So why are we here? And why is this so hard, right? I'm not interested in indicting the past. I am interested in understanding, right? Learning from whether they're mistakes or just the lessons learned as we go through. Every good expedition ends with a debrief when you circle back and say, how'd that go? And every great school is relentlessly asking, that was good, but how can we make it great? Right? Whether that's the food or the curriculum or the essential questions or the group's EB, on every single front, we're doing that relentlessly. I see lots of evidence of that here at T, that passion, right? This place was founded by passionate educators. Been around for 15 years, right? And we just find ourselves in this place where we have to pivot to being an institution of permanence, right? And that's a tricky moment. Fundamentally, from last year to this year, enrollment's down 16%. When enrollment declines, net tuition revenue declines. The numbers are big, right? Suddenly there's a $1.2 million gap. Okay. And why is that? Right. Well, it's always been hard work to enroll T. It's true for schools in general right now. These are not boom times for independent schools. Enrollment's something that everybody is struggling or challenged with periodically, right? All the more so for a school that's different, right? That in one way or another is an alternative path, right? That's seeking out something different, right? So that's always been tough, and it always will be, right? But we also have to own that it was a pretty rugged couple years, right? And I've heard plenty of these sort of stories and context and everything else, but in a few too many areas, right? Classes, etc., we just didn't sufficiently address some of the challenges we were facing, and we had some number of families who basically lost trust or faith in us and moved on, right? And that hurt enrollment, right? And then finally, we are certainly dealing with changed local demographic, right? Return to work and return to the office are having an impact on us, right? And there are simply fewer families and students available to us within a reasonable drive who could attend T, right? That demographic challenge is real, right? So you add all those up, I don't know in exactly what proportions, but suddenly, you were thinking, we were thinking 240 students and we have 205, right? And that's hard, okay? But when enrollment goes down, revenue goes down, right? And then you get into this challenge of having a deficit, okay? And it is fundamentally unsustainable. You're essentially spending the reserves we have, right? On the magnitude of close to half the reserves we have, right? So we need to slow down the tempo of that burn rate, if you will, right? We've already done an incredible amount of adjustments and changes at T. I'm sure many of you are aware of them, but they're to the program, they're to our finances, right? They're to our enrollment expectations. We're sort of realigning around all of those new realities. And I'll show you a bunch of the numbers in just a minute. But a lot of that is in process. Likewise, there's been a lot of work thinking about if we miss the message and the signal with regards to some retention issues, what are we going to do about it this year? And I have lots of evidence of lots of things that are going on. The high school journeys night is a great example, right? Of where we're making the case and trying to be clear about the situation we find ourselves in. And obviously, there's been some personnel changes, positions that haven't been filled. There's a lot of frugality going on. Larry is squeezing as much juice out of the lemon as he can. It's his job. And obviously this push today to really give people context and explain what's up. And why is this hard? I mean, lots of schools go through this, right? I mean, now more than ever, your kids need T and the world needs T. Right? When you just look at the broader context of what's out there in the world, it feels like our relevance is going up, not down. And so our hunger for success in many ways increases, right? We certainly want to honor the past, right? We're a K-12 school. We're in it for the long arcs, right? This isn't a 5-day science camp program, right? This is a 13-year experience for many of our students. And T does provide a fantastic education. I'm an outsider. I've been here for 7 weeks. What do I know? I actually know a lot. I've talked to a lot of people. I have a pretty good perspective on what we're doing and all the different facets. And it is exceptional, right? It is unique. It is special. And there's always an and, which you can always swap out for but or yet, but have it your way. The challenges we face are not unique, are not special. The solutions probably aren't either. Right? This isn't about stepping back and throwing the long ball and hoping somebody catches it and writes us a really big check. We've done and tried that before, although if you would like to do that, I would like to see you afterwards.
We won't turn it down.
We won't turn it down. But I mean, I see all kinds of examples, right? Of, the crucible of real stuff happening in our classrooms, of happening out on field studies, and they result in grit and growth. They result in those values on the wall. right? And there is a good faith effort not only to deliver on those things, but there's a good faith effort to, continue to improve in those areas. And we see it all over the place. And we're in a place right now where every decision is through the lens, right, of trying to strengthen the values, right, of trying to strengthen the institution. We also find ourselves with a litmus item, right? Got to make payroll, got to cover the basics, right? And we got to focus on those basics, right? And that's what this pivot is about, right? Is we've been through these huge cycles of growth, decline, campus has moved multiple times, right? Sort of the institution itself is actually pretty gritty, right? That doesn't make this moment any easier for any of us. And I'm also sort of amazed that, when you dig in, the numbers do speak for themselves, whether it's test scores or the way the incredible opportunity and breadth of opportunity that we see our students taking. It's amazing the number of students who are taking an interesting and alternative path through high school or through schooling or gone for 6 weeks, right, with their family on an adventure. And T's happy to support that, and it works. And those kids continue. They're not behind by 6 weeks. If anything, they're ahead by 6 weeks. And we do it over and over and over again, right? And that is unusual, right? It's pretty amazing to be at a school that can really be that supportive of our individual and collective families. That is atypical. And the college admissions list is impressive. It is, right? We swing a little bit above our weight, small but mighty, right? But more than anything, we see it aligned. We see students who are making choices about what's the right best fit for them and finding their way through that process. Okay. And it is simply amazing that this school raises 25% of the annual budget from the annual fund, right? On the one hand, we know that that's tricky and maybe not sustainable. On the other hand, it represents a passion for this place that is exceptional, right? And is worthy of noting. So now what? Now what do you do? We've got this great thing. What's the path forward? First off, keep it simple. It's like your checkbook and, the money coming in and the money going out. Those two things have to sort of be in alignment, right? Let's not turn this into something that's overly complicated. We're definitely in an inflection point. We're 15 years in, trying to pivot to being an institution of permanence. There are some challenges to that. We'll talk a little bit about the land and some of those things in just a minute. And also, we've been on this roller coaster where every upturn is the new normal and every downturn is just a temporary setback, except we just had a couple downturns. And you add them up and it feels like, oof, turning this corner feels hard, right? Feels like it's a big step back up, right? And it is. I'm not here to propose that there's an easy path through this. But obviously it's founded on the sort of core values of the experience of what actually happens. And what actually happens in a place like T is that you partner with the school and we work together to raise great humans, right? Who are intellectually curious, who have those values that are listed on the wall, right? Where those really are shared experiences. And you feel like you have a good faith partner through that whole experience. And I guess, raise your hand if in your quiet moments, but you would never admit this, right? That you think maybe just all in, just all average, everything else, your child is slightly above it. So we got this little Lake Wobegon world, right? That's okay. And actually, it's truly wonderful. That's the kind of environment we want to be in, right? It means that you all are brave, right? It also means that maybe you're seeking some atypical outcomes, right? That you'd like your kid's journey through school to be maybe different than the one you had, or just different than what's out there in the world for whatever reason. Maybe that's what your kid needs. Maybe that's in alignment with your family values, right? But if you want those atypical outcomes, right, you're at this place because we represent that atypical path that provides some opportunities that are not available anywhere else, right? But it comes with compromises, right? There are no pom-poms in football team. We have to go visit another school to do that. There are things that we don't get, right? This is not a fancy facility in campus, mainly because most of us don't care, right? We have the world's most beautiful and largest campus. It's just right outside those doors, right? And it extends from here all the way to Central America. So it is okay that that parents and families want their cake and eat it too. You want to have the full-blown tea experience, field studies, great experiences in class, fantastic connections between students and teachers, and solid SAT scores and the occasional AP test with a 4 or 5. And I'm down with that, right? Actually, that's already what's happening, right? It's not like we have to do anything different to get that outcome. It's already in process. Can we refine it? Yes. Can we get even better? Yes. Right? There are lots of ways that we can continue to evolve, right? And that's part of the issue. This place is 15 years old. It's no wonder that it feels like it's an environment of constant change, right? It is, right? I came from a school that was 90 years old. We had some traditions that were rugged. That like you couldn't change that. If I tried to change something or whatever else, I was here in 49. We've been, you're like, whoa, okay. So there's some real opportunity in our ability to be nimble, right? And let's take advantage of that. And I'll be blunt, we ask our students to do hard things every day. And this meeting is about me asking the adults, both our faculty and staff, our parents, our extended community, the adults' turn to do hard things, to make sure that this opportunity continues to thrive on behalf of your kids and the next generation of kids. So let's just agree that the current trend is unsustainable, and I'll back it with a few numbers, right? And we have to act, okay? With regards to enrollment, I'll keep this very straightforward. We need your help. The number one marketing tool for T, and frankly, for pretty much every school, especially any school that's in any way atypical, right, is word of mouth. That's the next layer of the onion, okay? There isn't, we can't spend 50 grand on an Instagram campaign and suddenly get 10 more students. If I had any confidence that that would work, we'd be full and over enrolled, right? The math is easy, but the reality is that's not how it works, right? There's lots going on here to make sure that we're addressing any inconsistencies and challenges that we've been facing as a community and a school, right? In terms of the delivery of our program, right? And I have a lot of faith in the leadership team working through each and every one of those things, trying to identify in what ways we can refine our practices and improve the experience that we provide for our students. Because in the end, it's about the student's experience of the mission. That's actually the commodity, right? But we do need your help to get the word out, right? And the strategy is word of mouth, right? And I've used this example many times, but when you're at the post office or the grocery store and you run into a friend and they're like, "Hey, how's it going? How's your family? Oh, you're over at T. Ooh, I heard it's been kind of a tough couple years over at T." What happens next is our future. And here's why we're still at T. Here's why it's worth it. Here's why the ways in which it meets our values and our family's needs or my kids' needs, right? What happens next? That's the story. That's our connection to our local community. That's the brand. That's where it happens. No amount of tuning up the logo is going to help us right now. It's a nice logo, by the way. It's fun, right? But it's just not where it is. Okay. And remember that it's just like layers of the onion. It's one or two layers out, right? The sort of obtuse, like, I have a friend in the Carolinas. I think they'd be really interested in tea. No, I mean, that's great. I'm happy to chat with them. But this really is like what's close to hand, right? The family that's, been in and out of Truckee and might be interested in actually being deeply connected in this place and being a part of this community, right? And sharing that and sharing the story. I want to be clear that you absolutely should tell your truth and the truth, right? Yeah, it was a wild couple years, and my kid really struggled at this grade level or in this class or with this teacher or whatever else. And right, and whatever that and is, it needs to be personal and from you because people listen to people. People make these decisions on the basis of those relationships. Courtney and I are raising money face to face, one person at a time. People give money to people, right? People commit to communities because somebody within that community brought them in. So invite folks to our events, right? Post on your social media, right? You can reshare our stuff, but even better, it's when it's personal and real, right? And if you have somebody you think might be interested, invite them and me to coffee or to a meal. I'll be there happily, right? And literally between now and September 2026, our enrollment is in our hands. It's in your hands, right? I'm happy to coach. I'm happy to support. It's a little bit more that I'm going to share a little bit further that's in that vein, right? But I don't want anybody to walk out of this room without understanding that piece of the puzzle, right? That's our pivot, our next piece and everything else is to address what is fundamentally a revenue problem that's fundamentally derived from an enrollment challenge. There's lots of things we need to do around that and to make sure it doesn't happen again, right? But that's fundamentally the puzzle we find ourselves. So 25% of our revenue comes from the annual fund, as I mentioned before. And it is amazing. It is miraculous. It was one of the things when I was applying for the job, I'm like, what's up with that? Right? Raising $1.5 or $2 million a year on a $7-8 million budget. That is really unusual, right? Now I understand donor fatigue and I understand why it's difficult, right? And we're also in a place where we need to sustain that, right, for a little bit, right, while we make this pivot, while we rebuild enrollment. And I'm going to come back and speak to the bunch of the finances and everything else, but a little interlude. Everybody's favorite. By the way, it's an independent school. That means you're going to get mail from us for the rest of your life. Just get over it.
Thanks, Christopher.
I'll go over.
Either way.
No.
Hello, everybody. I was asked actually yesterday at the TAP meeting to just say a few words this morning to clarify, just because we put out a lot of information and obviously we recognize that's hard to always read and digest. So two things that I want to talk about. One is that at the very beginning of T's history, we had an incredible family come in to support the school, and they were underwriting our operational budget by about $2 million a year. And that was for several years. When they pulled back that funding, their kids moved on, they graduated, they're actually alumni of the school. T really struggled at first to figure out how are we going to compensate for what was basically 25 to 30% of our income to operate the school. Amazingly, as Christopher alluded, our community stepped up for multiple years. We have raised $2.2 to $2.4 million. While we were doing it the whole time, we're like, this is not sustainable. This is crazy. Our donors are getting exhausted. What are we going to do when this one major donor leaves? It is not a sustainable long-term plan for the school. And yet, as we all know, it's not like you can just turn the faucet off, because then how do you make payroll? How do you keep the lights on? How do you run the buses? That said, we did make a very intentional decision this year to drop the operational fundraising goal, the amount that we're trying to raise each year, from over $2 million to 1.5. Now, that isn't because we suddenly don't need the $2 million. As Christopher said, we are dipping into the reserves in order to do that. But it was a very strategic decision for two things. One, we recognize that with the lower enrollment, setting a $2 million goal might feel really defeating. Nobody likes to fail really badly. You want little failures frequently, but not a total fall on your face. So we didn't want it to be just unachievable, the goal that we set out, and create an unrealistic budget. But the second reason was very strategic. We want to move away from having so much of our income dependent on fundraising, because that is a lot of pressure on our families. It is important, and I will say, Christopher is such a quick study. I don't know if everybody else has figured that out, but in 8 weeks, he absorbed so much information. He did one little verbiage challenge, which is we haven't been raising that money from the annual giving campaign. We've been raising that money in 2 initiatives, right? So we have one goal, which is our operational gap. This year, we've set it at 1.5, but we raise that in 2 initiatives. The annual giving campaign, which we are right in the middle of right now. Everybody does know that, right? 15 days, we're 1 weekend. And then the gala. Now, what's happened in the last couple of years is that we have had people traditionally, we like to party. We're a group that likes to party. We love to buy our fun vacations. We have been raising more of our operational money that we need at the gala than in the annual giving campaign. And that is really challenging for our budget and our board, because it means we're waiting till the end of May to know whether we're even going to close that huge percentage of our income. So what we have done this year is we have asked people to try to prioritize the annual giving campaign and make sure we hit that number, which somebody from the audience, how much are we trying to raise? 750. Thank you. So we want to make sure that we hit that 750 here in December so that the board can work towards a budget and put out contracts for faculty in February. If we are waiting till May, that gets really difficult. So where are we right now? Oh, look, it's already right there. So we are currently tracking in a nice direction in that we are 1 week into a 2-week campaign, and we have raised half the money from about half our families. And that's great. But what we need is we need the orange to go all the way to the top. We have for multiple years in a row had 100% participation from the community. I'm really hoping that we get there again. Thank you so much for those of you in the room. I see many of you who have already given. If you happen to bump into your neighbor, feel free to remind them, hey, the campaign is only another week. Have you helped our crew get to 100%? I know that we have one crew that is literally knocking on the door. I think we have a crew that's at 95% and another crew that's at 90%. So we're getting closer. Just to reiterate, the gala, so we have this 750, and then the gala will be in May, on May 9th. And all the funds raised from both of those initiatives go to close the gap, and they pay for faculty, they pay for field work, they pay for facilities, they pay for student resources, they close the operational gap. Okay, thank you very much in advance. And I do have one small request, which is that when we're all said and done, and Christopher has answered all of your questions, if some of you would stay for a moment so that we can take a photo being optimistic and manifesting. We have 100% participation sign, and I'd love to take a photo with some families holding that up, manifesting that that's where we'll be next Tuesday. So, and we'll also publish it. Thank you very much. I'll give it back to you.
Thanks. So, if you are a faculty, staff member, or work for T, raise your hand. So 100% of those folks have already given to the campaign. If you're on the board of trustees, raise your hand. 100% of the board of trustees has already given to the campaign. This participation piece is hugely important. It's a signal to one another, right, about our collective and communal commitment, and it's a recognition of how powerful people working together towards a common cause really and truly is. It really is, you know, every dollar matters, right? And participation isn't about how big the check is. It's about the act. It's about the signaling to one another that we're all in to do for this endeavor. So, anything else on fundraising for right now? Great. Land. Campus update. Okay. So I'm learning fast. There's a lot to learn. Wholly complicated. And there's clearly a need to, I'm very sympathetic, especially to a lower school family that's looking over the horizon line up here to these buildings up here and wondering, in 10 years, will my kid be going to school in the modulars? Will it just be the same, right? Are we going to be able to find our way out of this, right? The answer is yes, right? Yes, we need to do a bunch of planning. We already have a strong alternative, which is the conveyance, if you've heard that piece, right? Which is an 8-acre parcel right here, right? And of course, simultaneously, we want to aspire towards having the dirt under our feet continue to be T, right? This is complicated. My sense is I'm not going to be the magical person who solves this, right? But I can drive the process around which we get to much more clarity about the plan over the next 3 to 5 years. We're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. And in the meantime, you know, and then we're going to move a little bit, 100 yards, right? And in the meantime, we're going to see if there are other avenues that we can pursue, right? And, you know, this is an amazing spot. This was an amazing thing that was done once upon a time for this community, right? And we need to bridge from that past and some of the complexities that are surrounded around that towards the future, right? And just putting together a plan that really allows us and people to understand that path and have some sense of the timing. That's something I'll be working on in the next couple months and output sometime this spring. And we can manage this. I know right now when you're the nadir of change and everything else, but this school has moved multiple times. Right? The school has grown, it has shrunk. I said that before. And this is in our wheelhouse, like it or not. Right? We know how to run school in temporary modular buildings where we're waiting to build something else. Been there, done that. Right? And we're in a school in a community that actually you didn't send your kids here for the architecture. Right? You didn't send your kids here. Never mind, building one's lovely, but that's not the point. That you didn't send your kids here because you were looking for buildings of permanence. You were looking for an experience that would build character and young adults of substance, right? And that's well represented here. So more to come on the land front, and I can answer some specific questions, although frankly, I'm still leaning into trying to understand all the complexities and what might be the path forward, and in particular, the timing of it, right? Finances. So I'm the sizzle, Larry's the steak. Okay, he's here to answer the hard questions. So I'll do a little song and dance. If you have a tough question, we have Larry here to answer. I'm actually happy to do a granular dive on any that you're going to show here. A lot of people don't love looking at screens full of numbers, so this will go fairly promptly. But if you want a deeper dive, come see us. Larry, Annie, there's myself, there's lots of us who are happy to dive in and explain how this all works and the whys of it all, right? But some big picture stuff. This is income, money in. Where'd it come from, right? That's last year, and this is the current school year. The only real takeaway you need to see is 8.6 million versus 7 million, right? $1.6 million problem, okay, from last year to this year. What you're looking at is the actuals for last year and our forecast for this year. Right? Last year's are not yet audited. We're right in the process of doing the audit. So these are not audited numbers. Okay. And these numbers are forecasted numbers, right? Whenever I show you the current year. Okay. Although we have a pretty tight sense of what the expenses are going to be this year now that we're well into it. The other thing you could certainly see, you could see the 25% for fundraising. You could see that, you know, as a portion of our revenue, net tuition went down a couple percentage points, as you would expect, because enrollment went down. That makes sense. Okay. And expenses. These are the checks we write and the money that goes out, right? So when you add up everything, wages, compensation, and benefits, that's actually about 71%. Wages themselves are about 67%. Okay. And so the orange piece of the pie is where all the money goes. And that's the way it should be. The most valuable thing in a school, the most valuable resource is your kid's time on task directed towards the mission. That's the most valuable resource. The second most valuable resource is faculty helping them on that journey. The pedagogues who walk beside them to do that, okay? And that's what we spend all our resources on, as it should be, okay? And all the other stuff, you know, yeah, we spend a lot on field work in classrooms, right? But that's because it's in our DNA, right? It's who we are, it's what we do. You couldn't have any dollars that are more mission aligned than field work in classroom. Okay. And about half of that is field work. And school operations, transportation, and other stuff. I'm going to show this to you in a slightly different format. And so this is like a P&L, right? It's the money in up top and the money out on the bottom, right? I don't expect you to look at all these numbers. I rounded them all to the thousands. Larry likes stuff in the details down to the cents. I make everything rounded to the thousands. Okay. And I want to point out a couple things. Enrollment went from 242 to 203. That's a 16% drop, right? That resulted in this 1.6 in terms of decreased in revenue from last year to this year. Okay. Almost all of that has to do with net tuition revenue, right? But there are some other parts and pieces. We did decrease the fundraising goal. So there's a decrease, right? There's another 400K. Okay. And then there's a lot of minutia and everything else, right? But a 19% drop in revenue. That's the problem. It's a revenue problem. Okay. Because we've already done a lot of work from last year to this year in terms of trying to save on expenses, right? Compensation's down 11%, right? We've already asked a lot of our faculty with nominal raises, no retirement benefit. Okay. We've already done a lot of that, decreased the total number of positions, right? I'm not saying there isn't, more to think about in there or whatever else, but we're running out of road. Okay. And general administration, we've decreased that by 23%. That's just like running around saving here and there and crimping as best we can, right? And that's really important. And what's interesting is when you look at everything else, it adds up to 16%. No amount of saving paper at the photocopier balances the budget in a school. Doesn't work. You should do it for environmental reasons, but not for financial reasons. Larry hates it when I say that. Larry's like, we'll save paper. It's in his DNA. But the reality here is that, you know, these are the big drivers. Okay. And you end up with this 933 number in terms of what we've changed our expenses from last year to this year. Right. But unfortunately, 933 and 1.6 are not the same number. Right. If they were the same number, we'd be having a different conversation today. Okay. But they're not quite. So, what needs to happen is we need to hold down expenses, right? And do whatever we can to increase revenue to buy time. And here's why, right? When you go through an enrollment decline, what you need is time for that to bounce back up. Okay. It's a slow moving indicator, right? What you say about T and our community's perception of T, right? No matter how positive, right? It takes a few years for that to translate into enrollment, right? And we got to deal with that gap, right? We got to find a bridge for that gap. And that's a lot of what's going to be happening from this year to next year, right? As we're trying to buy time and basically decrease the total deficit to a reasonable number, right? That gives us a couple years for enrollment to turn the corner, okay? It's tricky because we have a decreased base, right? The denominator, that's the number on the bottom. You'll remember that from elementary math, right? D down, great. That number's smaller. It's 205 instead of 240, right? So the families who can pay tuition, there's fewer of them. The families who can give to the annual fund, there are fewer of them. The families who can say great things about us out in the world, there are fewer, right? And that's one of the tricky parts of this. And this is why we need to turn this corner. So what to expect? Well, my best guess is that, you know, enrollment's going to hold or maybe even decrease next year. I don't think we turn this corner instantly, right? I don't think we suddenly bounce back to 210 and then to 220 the next year, right? I think we might go down into the 190s, right? And then back up, right? I do believe it will turn the corner. I see lots of evidence of that. I can't tell you how many families, when I met with them, they're some version of we love tea and we're but, right? But there was a deep commitment, right? And it's certainly represented by everybody showing up, you know, to spend an hour and a half on a random Tuesday morning. But you could expect tuition to go up. There's no way to make this work without tuition going up. It's going to be inflation plus 3 or 4 points, right? That's like the reality when I start doing the math. There's a lot of different versions of it, right? I would hope that we could do something like a 3-year plan where it's like 753 or some equivalent in terms of like give people some clarity about what the journey is going to be in terms of that piece, right? We're also really facing some huge challenges with things like international travel and the costs of doing that, right? And we have to evaluate whether there needs to be some offset or some fee that's related to international travel, right? We're going to have to continue with, you know, the sort of de facto hiring freeze, right? In terms of we're going to evaluate very carefully if somebody leaves, whether we're filling the position or whether we can move people around, right? And we may have to reorganize some roles. So there may be some changes and those will have impacts, right? And it's the leadership team is deep into those discussions in terms of trying to figure that out. I want to be clear though, that you can't have a high school, especially an independent high school, and not have a college counselor or not have student support, right? We don't have like, it's not the college counseling office, it turns out, is not an office of 6 people, right? It's an office of 1, right? And Katie does other stuff too, right? And so, it's the scale issues for a school of a 13-year or 13-year school, right? For 205 students, the scale issues are tricky, especially one that's deeply committed to getting out into the field. And there are some real limitations. We might be able to have 26 students in a math class, right? But we can't then take those same 26 students with 2 faculty to a foreign land, right? And so we're trying to wrestle with some of those things, right? And that, you know, that's one of our challenges that's innate, that is special to T, right? That this commitment around small class sizes, right, has real consequences in terms of the total number of staff. But the more staff you have, given a finite budget, the less we pay them, the less their budget, I mean, the less their benefits, right? And that's the unfortunate cold calculus, right? We're certainly going to lean into things like tuition remission, right? And some of those other benefits. But I want to be like super clear about this. You know, this it's a significant part of compensation for many of our employees. Not only that, their kids are fantastic. They get into T, and I know how much they make, and they qualify for full financial aid anyway. So what's the semantic here, right? So it's not that we don't have to look at it and think about it, right? And I understand there's some important signaling and messaging related to that, but the reality is it's not some big low-hanging apple on the tree that we get to pick. It's just not, right? And the faculty have already given it the office, right? They've done a lot in the last year or two. This has not been years of big raises. It's been a point or two, right? This has not been, we have not been dialing up the benefits, right? If anything, they've been decreased. You know, we couldn't cover retirement last year. We're not going to do it this year, right? So there's just not a lot of room there. And they deserve, from me in particular, but our collective community, some shelter from as we try and work our way through these next year or two, right? Because they're the ones who are right there on the front line, making sure that what you see on the wall and what you heard from these 3 students, they're the ones who are making sure that happens day in and day out, right? And we're going to continue to do that as best we can. And obviously we're going to look at all kinds of different things, and we've got a bunch of harebrained ideas, most of which are harebrained and we won't do. But we have to think carefully about the sort of ancillary services we offer, and are they really supporting the mission, right, or generating revenue? And if they're not deeply connected to the mission, right, or providing significant revenue, they have to change. Doesn't mean they have to get eliminated, but they have to change. That's what streamlining and that's what change and the pivot looks like. So, I guess I already mentioned, this is how we decreased compensation and benefits by $700K. I guess I mentioned all of these things. Total number of staffing has decreased via merging and not filling positions. Nominal salary increased last year to this year. Retirement benefits went from 5 to actually 0 to 0. We've decreased general and administrative expenses, and sort of across the board sort of belt tightening. And there's more to do in the domain of decreasing expenses, but it's becoming diminishing returns, right? In terms of just the amount of effort that's required to save $10,000 or $20,000 just going up and up and up and up and up and up. And it may not be, like I said, this is fundamentally a revenue problem. So I want to take some time. I have a few more things to wrap with at the end, but I wanted to open it up to questions and answers. I did bring the brain trust. The leadership team is here. So if it's a hard question, I'll make them answer it, and we'll go from there. Who wants to kick us off? Do you guys need to go? You do not have to. You can stay, but you do not have to stay here. I'm sorry, I should have said that ages ago. You listen to me prattle on. Thank you. That was awesome. One more time for them. And for those of you on Zoom, if you via the chat, if you type a question, Allie will raise her hand on your behalf and ask the question. But Annie.
Regarding on campus, you talked a little bit about moving.
Yep.
Maybe I misunderstood that.
So
possibility.
there's a path, right? That's once the conveyance is subdivided, et cetera, or whatever else, then we have a couple years too by contract, right?
Christopher.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who do not really understand the 8-acre conveyance. I
Oh,
think it'd be
sure.
a good
Okay,
idea
let me back up. So this goes back some number of years. I actually don't have all the dates in my head, okay? But it ties to when the ECE was built, okay? Part of that process, right? At that juncture, it was full steam ahead, right? To build out this campus as you see it. I mean, you see all the infrastructure, nicest curb and gutter I've ever seen in a school. And the utilities are all there, okay? That was on one trajectory, right? A piece of that puzzle was that if for some reason this doesn't all work out or whatever else, the school T, the not-for-profit T, gets 8 acres, right? Right? That gets subdivided off these 42. Okay, that was just in there. right? It wasn't an afterthought, right? But it actually wasn't deemed at the time as a particularly important matter, okay? There's a portion of this that I'm not going to dive in deeply to, right? But essentially, you have a school and a community that has a profound and incredible relationship with a founding, not a founding family, but a family who was here from the early days, subsidized the schools and helped step T up and grow and move to this place, right? And then that got complicated, right? And it got really messy and complicated. And I'm still trying to sort of understand all the nuances of that, right? And to a degree, it's time for a clean slate, right? Sometime in the next year or two, this conveyance, you can see the sign up there from the county or whatever else, will be completed, right? And then from that point forward, we'll have about 2 years to move the school onto that conveyance, onto that property. There's a lot of details that go into that, but that gives you a 3 to 5 year timeline right there, right? And of course, in the meantime, right, we should make a good faith effort to see if there is a deal to be had, if there's a path forward for T, right, that allows us to stay on the full 42 or some version thereof, right? And I can promise you that this is front and center, and the board has spent a lot of time on this and will continue to spend a lot of time on this. It's real estate, it's land, it's negotiations, it's legal. There's a reason why the process feels opaque. I'm going to work on trying to get as much clarity as I can for the community in terms of timelines and basic expectations, right? And then hopefully we get pleasantly surprised, right? But it's tricky. We may have to do some, real fundraising. We may have to do, but it's interesting to be a school that, has such strong fundraising over the years, but hasn't been able to fundraise for capital and buildings, which opens new avenues, right? And so it'd be great to make that pivot to permanence. And I think it's part of what needs to happen over the next 3 to 5 years is get to a much higher level of certainty and just move on and move forward, whatever it might be. I promise you that 8 acres in the middle of Truckee, California is a pretty viable, especially right here, is a perfectly viable spot to run a school. It's plenty big and all that, right? And there's a lot more to it that I'm not alluding to, only in part because I'm learning as I go on that. Did I answer that question? Yeah. What else? Yeah.
I appreciate the frankness, the numbers and everything, the detail with which you got into just the challenge at hand here. And then also interesting the perspective that you're saying it's not going to turn the corner right away, that it's, that there's going to be likely be a downturn and then a recovery. What do you think needs to happen to program wise in those 2 years, let's say, that when the good vibes get around the community and people start coming back, that when they come, they're going to find that promise being delivered on a daily basis? What do you think needs to happen program wise so that when people are back, they're retaining?
I think there's a couple things. One is, I can bounce the budget right now. You all would leave because I'd have to fire every other teacher, right? It'd be silly. Does it make sense? So part of what we have to do is be very mindful about how we go through this process so that we have the capacity to go back to 240 or whatever the right number is, right? I think the other piece, which I see lots of evidence of, right, is we just have to continue with the sort of relentless incremental improvement, right? This isn't about the fundamental model, the nature of the place, the values that drive it, those are all pretty strong, right? And I've had almost 30 conversations with different parents, and same thing with faculty and staff and board. And lots of people have lots of suggestions. Some of them are fantastic, some of them are harebrained, but that's okay. And we need to sort of keep sorting through that and becoming our best self as a school. So I think, and then there's another really important sort of, I think, cultural piece, right? School, 15 years, incredible amount of founding energy and everything else. Wouldn't it be great if and you add this one thing, wouldn't it be great if and you add this other thing, and the tyranny of the good idea starts to weigh down and dilute, right? I think there is a bit of a process over the next year or two to keep driving towards where is the essence of what T is about, and is this program, this element truly supportive and driving towards that? I think that's a part of the journey. I don't have I wish we had a football team because then I could cut it, Right? Blasphemy. Football fans of the room are like, I was with him until then. Got it. Anyway, so diehard Packers, whatever. But there isn't anything that's like self-evident, right? That that we just get to like radically change or eliminate or whatever else that to like significantly moves the needle. So it really is about that cultural shift, right? And can we trade away some of the breadth for even more depth? Right. And can we seek out that clarity? But a lot of it is around practices, right? Excellence comes from like curriculum work, right? Excellence comes from like nitty-gritty conversations with the faculty about like what are our grading and homework practices? What are our, how are our values expressed? And I think one of the things that's interesting is that schools that have a deep commitment to experiential learning in one form or another, they have something in common, right? Which is everything else is ruthlessly efficient because it allows for the innate inefficiency of experiential education, right? Which is effective, which is wonderful. It's just not efficient. It takes time, it takes resources, right? And so to a degree, the rest of the school has to be, efficiently run, right? And there's plenty of room for improvement there. And there's no surprise here. It's a school that's 15 years old. We're trying to figure it out. Larry's been at it for the last couple of years, and a lot has changed and improved on that front. So that's a lot what has to happen. And I know that's not like super specific, but I'm only 7 weeks and 2 days in. Yeah.
Can you just repeat all the questions that are asked in the room?
Yes.
So Zoom can hear.
Great. Yeah.
Thinking about recruitment. We're a family that have done the private school, the public schools in the area.
Yep.
And trying to think, how would I recruit or tell people about it? So my question is I wonder how much we've been out in the community. I mean, I know T has been out in the community somewhat, like the Truckee Thursdays or whatnot. But when we were looking into the school for the first time, I think about 5 years ago, there was a lot of volunteerism.
Mhm.
And maybe now that I'm just thinking about this hasn't been a thought for a long time, but there's not as much volunteerism in Truckee.
Yeah.
Or the area, or the whole area where we can, or Incline Village. But if we were more into the community, how can we get out there?
Sure.
How can we show T to?
Absolutely. I think, yeah. How do we expand community involvement and get the word out essentially in our local community? Was it the nature of the question?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a Hearts and Minds campaign. The TAP was just talking about this the other day, right? And sort of one of the outcomes of this is like, what are the differentiators? Right? And I look at this list and I'm like, for the love of God, don't walk up to somebody in the post office and go, come to T. We grow independent thinkers and doers. Every student is known and valued. Please don't do that, right? But please do internalize the message that's in here and think about the story and the experience you had, right? About like, actually, my kid's got this weird fetish for rockets, and this is how it's supported in school, and it gets to be expressed, right? Or my shy 7th grader finally found their voice out on a field trip at an expedition, right? That builds on these things, right? What are those examples of independent thinking, right? And doing, right? When your kid or young adult, expresses independence and actually does something like the dishes would be great. And you're like, wow, right? What happened? You come back from this trip and suddenly now you're interested in cooking. But same thing in terms of, what's it like to have your kid at a school where you have confidence that they're known, needed, and valued, right? And if you have a story about that, or you have an experience about that, those are the things we need to share. And yes, we need to relentlessly look for opportunities to do that. It's our job, it's Allie's job to lean into some of the relationships between local organizations. We'll certainly take the recommendations and the connections, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's ski teams or sport clubs or drama programs, right? But actually, T students in a drama program is outreach, right? They make friends and they make connection, right? So we really are just that one layer out on the onion. So we're really looking for folks who can bring T entree into some subset of our community where parents and students congregate, right? Where people can share their experience, right? And again, I want and we need people to be authentic. This place goes no place if it's not based on authenticity, right? So it is about finding those opportunities. And I'm a little hampered here. Like I've only been here for 7 weeks, so I don't have the names and know all of them.
Just some volunteer opportunities that are current.
No, that's what I'm thinking. Oh, when,
That you were.
oh, yes,
experienced
like
by
us,
yourself.
like the students going and cleaning up the community, like the students helping, I know like psychology now is going into the hospice.
Sure.
But for our students going out and being visible, helping.
They're actually, it's interesting. So I think that may be being skewed by the ages of your kids, because we have a service learning coordinator, and actually our lower grades do a ton of work, way more than they ever did in the local community. It's just that our older kids tend to do their service work on field work, which is outside of our
Thank you.
community.
I
So it's
love
just
that.
part of the scaffolding. But actually the lower school, I will say that most of the work that they're doing may not brush up against immediately school age kids. We're in the senior center a lot. There's a variety of places where our
Consider having another child.
someone who has a kid. But we are actually, our students did well over 4,500 hours of community service locally last year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Yeah.
Only a couple of different things you touched on. So I think the differentiation is fantastic. That's what we all love about a team. We mentioned time that we want to have our cake and eat it too. You want this plus the great
Yep.
SAT scores and APs and all that. With an eye towards recruitment in the community, trying to get more families in, trying to get more families willing to pay private school tuition.
Sure.
Is there a consideration of increasing transparency of things like test scores and kind of core educational outcomes? People can look for any of the public schools and see when their math scores, and see when their reading scores are. I think if you convince people to be willing to pay for a private school, they want to know that this is at least on par on those, if not better. They want to pay for an atypical outcome for them.
Sure. And we're started down that road, like in the high school journeys presentation, we're like, well, here's the average SAT score for our seniors. And here's, what it is nationally for independent schools. We're a bit higher, right? And so we're trying to, and we're trying to thread that needle in terms of, you got to be careful in that we're never going to be a school that's fixated on how do we max out SAT scores and how many kids can take how many APs and get how many 4s and 5s. That's just,
Like lower school ages.
Yeah,
too.
and so, but like, and we have, and we are ramping out and Kristen could speak to this as, more access. We've actually done this testing for a long time, but we're now rolling out better access and our ability to share that information. It takes a minute. This is part of that sort of lag time piece. I think a few years ago, it just didn't occur to anybody, like, why would we do this? Right? We've got 240 students. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you want anything?
So I think on a personal level, when your kids have gone through our elementary school, you probably have received STAR scores for a very large chunk of time, probably since you have been here. We are looking at, and hop in here, I misspeak, we're looking at how we best display our average, like reading and math assessments. Sometimes with our sample size, we're really small. So our fourth, like we might have, how many third graders do we have right now?
Well, total our secondary 17.
Yes, so like N is very small for some of those, so it gets a little tricky of how we display them. However, student support has been working pretty hard over the past 6 months of how we display them.
Yeah, we're on track with it. Two pieces I'll just add to that are, so with STAR data, you can already see how we compare nationally because that's how the scores are presented. And then with M-Class, which we started last year, that data digitalized will make it far easier for us to share our reading scores. For example, our 80% of our kids reading over grade level, and that's the kind of thing we'll be able to share in probably by the end of this year, if not beginning of next.
I think that will help with recruitment, right? So people want to have great educational offers for kids and they have lots of countries. They just want to be
You're paying for something and you're speaking out.
But it's just a mindset. It's an acknowledgement. Like we've always prided ourselves in not being the test score place. So if you want test scores, who cares? Because we're team, we're different. And like, well, holy shit. We need to publish that.
Yeah. And we haven't promoted
the fence, and we need to acknowledge that. So
yeah, I asked the same question.
They have test scores even if you don't prioritize it. Like that's what.
And we haven't again, sort of not in our DNA, which is sort of sweet in its own way. It's sort of, we haven't promoted. They're like, actually, you know, in high school, if you want a high school where they do 4 years of math and a high percentage of the students take calculus, you know, A, B, and B, C, or whatever else, we're in. You know, selected for, you know, or admissions to highly selective schools, the litmus class, like it or not, the reality is that it's calculus, right? You got to show that you can like suffer through calculus. It's too bad because there's some really cool math, but it's not calculus. And statistically, you're not anti-math. And the, you know, so some of those things we are starting to be a little more overt about, in part just because we want to arm you when somebody's like, yeah, but it's not rigorous. You're like, well, depends what you mean by rigorous. You know, we do have plenty of examples of kids who have an aptitude and an interest in something, and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna take the AP, right? And they do pretty well. They get their 4 and their 5, right? And in some ways, that's even better. You know, you really want your kid to be in a bunch of AP classes or whatever else and get a bunch of 2s and 3s. What was this all for? You know, what was the actual benefit? You know, teach to the test for a year, right? It's just banal, right? So other questions? So a couple things. I have a couple. Oh, was there one other one? Did I miss one? Any of them online? Did we miss any?
So we just had a comment from a parent.
Okay.
Long
Long comments.
comment.
We'll skim it and decide whether you want to share it or we'll just read it after.
Sorry. I think they just want to focus on, this parent wants to focus on music and the performing arts as
Sure.
well.
Let me speak to that.
Yeah, perfect.
Definitely. So music of the performing arts. The you know, this is the when No Child, sorry. When No Child Left Behind came out nationally, right? We saw what happens when you focus solely on reading and math scores, right? And nationally, you saw our commitment in public schools to arts, music, athletics just march downwards, right? And we got really focused on schools, got really focused on seat time in 1 or 2 subject areas and teach to the test, right? And it takes only a moment and one deep breath to step back and recognize that for all students, right, art matters, music matters, right? Even the kids for whom it's not their passion, right? Being exposed to it, seeing their friend get really into it, right? Discovering something new, being challenged to try something that isn't, you know, isn't your thing, right? But you know, it's so important that these create endeavors are woven through pre-K through 12, right? And there's opportunities for students to do them formally, like as a class or within another class, right? And then informally outside of the regular sort of school, right? Whether it's the rock band and music program.
Wednesday night at Alibi.
Wednesday night Alibi. You should all be there. I'm gonna have a lighter. I'm gonna bring a Bic lighter and I'll be there. Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Yep. Yes, absolutely. And that's one of those areas where, you know, we would love to push foreign language farther down in grade levels, right? It's not like we don't have that aspiration or whatever else, but the next 6 months probably aren't the moment. I'm just being realistic, right? Yeah. Well, we do have the club, which has been great, right? And that's the great bridge to formalizing some of those things and pulling those things in, right? And actually, so great to be able to experiment, you know, in afternoon activities and the stuff that really resonates over time. Those are the things that should get pulled in, right, into the more formal curriculum. It's a great testing ground, right? And that's a healthy sort of creative process, an iterative process for a school trying to figure out and find its way, like what version of T do we mean and how are we going to get there? Yeah.
I just wanted to add on a little bit. Christopher
Please.
talked about our pre-K through 12 arts program. Hopefully everyone has had the chance to meet 2 of our enrichment instructors. I've been calling it Enrichment Plus because I will say it has gone further than I think we have had in the past. We have Chance and Eileen who are really differentiating of what we can provide for enrichment programs. Our kids have enrichment from pre-K through 5 built into their schedule, and every student can choose to be in music or art in middle school and high school. Highlighting also rock band that Dave runs, and also our two players, which my daughter has done theater around town, and Beth is one of the most caring and special people to lead our program. And I think this year we're second through 12th grade is a performance. For a little school to have those opportunities is incredibly special. And when we think about one of our differentiators, it's that extra piece, and it's coming out of No Child Left Behind of saying, what is, what are the extras? To a lot of us, those aren't extras. Those are very important to our child's education and growth. So I guess think about those when you're looking at enrichment or how you talk to other people about those places. But that is a place that's near and dear, I think, to who we are as a program.
And sorry.
Clarifying question. Fifth and up, do they have to choose between art and music, or do they have both?
6th grade to 12th grade, they get a choosing intensive, which is an elective, and so they choose one. So they can't have both, but per semester. So you could take art one semester and music.
But they can
Yes. And there's also some art clubs. Eileen is running a fashion design club right now, hoping also some kids develop some of their design portfolios for the college applications. But we also have 5th graders in there who just love designing clothes.
And if you have an expertise and you feel like you really can and really want to work with kids, I'll pay you twice as much as we pay Dave. Right? So, right. We can afford that. I know we can afford that. Right. But that's why Rock Band's awesome. It's because we had one parent who was like, I can do this and I want to do this. And it started from this kernel and it became this thing. Right. And we had a faculty member who's like, I love doing student performances in theater. Right. And it's turned into this thing. And we're always looking for the next thing. Right. So please, reach out to us if that's I need to wrap us up because time. Is that okay? Any final? Okay. These are ways you can help. Share your story. Right. I just can't emphasize how important this is. It's the layers of the onions, just one or two layers out. Okay. It's folks that for some reason might be connected or could be connected to this community in place. Person to person, hearts and minds. That's how it's done. Okay. And enrollment is in our hands right now. There isn't some other path. We'll explore lots of other opportunities and we're working on a bunch of other things, but this is where it lies, right? Especially between now and next September, right? Don't forget the capital campaign. Remember that 100% of the faculty, 100% of the staff, 100% of the board of trustees is all in. And I'm looking forward to and expecting that 100% of our parents will be all in. And there's the sign that you get to hold up. We're literally going to take the picture and then hold everybody to account afterwards. That'll work. Please, come to the gala, and be inspired, engage with these other initiatives, and finally, if you're inspired by the experiences your kid are having at tea, or you want to make sure that it's here for your grandkids to attend, right? Then come see me. I'm happy to have some of those conversations. I'm happy to have conversations about folks who are willing to help bridge us from where we are now into the future, right? If that's within your ability and your willingness, then come see me, come see Courtney. We definitely want to have those conversations. They're really important. And I guess I would encourage everybody to expect and celebrate the change that's coming. Right? That we got to tighten down the straps of the pack and hike on through and keep going. Right? And we ought to relish the challenge rather than fear it. That means you should relish opening up your enrollment agreement. Thank you. And by all means, partner with us to do what needs doing and tell the story. My sort of final couple thoughts. I mentioned that, change is hard. And that we're all in this together, right? And it doesn't work unless we find that path to do this together, right? But in doing so, I also understand that there will be some collateral, right? That for some families, as if we tighten up to a core or whatever else, that might not work for everybody. I just want to recognize that that's part of the hardship as you go through change in schools. Right. And that's true for our extended community, our employees, our faculty, and everything else. It's just the reality of working through that. And as I mentioned before, I appreciate every single family and their bravery right? In seeking that atypical path and in joining us in this grand endeavor, right? That's why we're here. That's why we will be here. That's why we can and will thrive, right? And in the meantime, financial discipline and sustainability are front and center, right? I know that. I see that as my charge over the next 18 months is to relentlessly push towards that. And as I said, I'm looking forward to doing my part, right? And to doing the hard thing of helping us try and figure this out and find our way, right? And asking folks to join. And I really do, I believe in what this place is up to. I've known about tea for a long time from afar, right? And as I said, I have lots of, parallel experience and everything else. And this is a worthy endeavor, right? And I'm convinced that there is a path forward. Didn't say easy, but there is a path forward. And I look forward to walking beside everybody within this community as we find our way. Really appreciate everybody's time today. Logistics, if you're sitting in a white chair, there's one next to you, please put it on the thing over there. And clean up after yourself because there's class in here shortly. When's the next class in here?
35 minutes.
Okay, in 35 minutes. So I'm happy to stay and answer other individual questions. And thank you all for your time. And thank you for sharing your kids with us. Photo.